Dialogue is often the place where writers struggle most. It is hard to recreate people's voices on the page and make it seem like they're real people, make it seem lively, make them seem spirited. So what we're going to do in this video today is I'm going to help you solve those problems. And I'm going to give you 7 concrete techniques that you can use to make your characters really come alive on the page and speak in a way that grabs the reader's interest. Let's get started with technique number 1, the Pope shift. So Alexander Pope came up with a term for the sudden change in tone from the very elevated down to the very mundane. And this is often used for comic effect, or at least I find it pretty funny most of the time. And he called this term bathos. Now, I mean, that's an all right term if you want to use it. I kind of like the Pope shift a little bit more, so that's the term we're running with right now. Now, he was talking about bathos because in his day, poets were doing this unintentionally, and he was like, what's wrong with you guys? But I do think there is a way that you can use this intentionally, and it works really well in your dialogue. Let's look at a book by Douglas Adams, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There is a moment when someone is asking the deepest question of all: what is the meaning of life? Which is a very weighty topic and a very serious topic. And they go back and forth, and finally the answer is 42. So it's a great comedic moment because we thought we were going to get some sort of like very sophisticated, very smart answer. And instead the answer is just sort of nonsensical. Like, what does 42 even mean? For another example of the Pope shift, let's look at The Princess Bride by William Goldman.
Sonny, true love is the greatest thing in the world. Except for a nice MLT, mutton, lettuce, and tomato sandwich when the mutton is nice and lean.
Oh, we're talking about true love. The deep mysteries of true love. And then comparing it to, you know, a sandwich. Or look at Hunt for Red October with Sean Connery. Someone asked him, like, what are our chances not to die? And he's like,
personally, I give us 1 chance in 3.
And then immediately says, right after discussing life or death,
And more tea anyway.
So you can also reverse this technique and be talking about something like super, super lowbrow and then rise to something really, really elevated. But I think for most comedy purposes, it works better going from elevated to the mundane. Hey, if you've been thinking about Bookfox Lab, this is what some of our graduates have been saying. Tuesday called the lab transformative and her mentor was a true godsend. Chris said that even though he had 20 years writing experience, the lab was still a really valuable experience for him. And Trish said that what really set the lab experience apart was that one-on-one time and one-on-one feedback from her mentor. So if you want to learn more with me and work closely with a mentor, I would recommend that you click the link in the description and please apply for the lab. I'd love to work with you on your book. The second writing technique we're going to look at is called the Pinter Pause. This dialogue technique is named after Harold Pinter, who is a very famous playwright, and he often used moments of silence in his plays to radically increase the tension. And I think his strategy was what is left unsaid in your book can be just as powerful as what is actually said. So in the very first line of his play Homecoming, his main character asks this question:
What have you done with the scissors?
And then for 4 very long seconds, the other character doesn't respond. And so he says again,
I said, I'm looking for the scissors. What have you done with them?
Once again, there's a long pause. There's no answer. And so he has to say again,
Did you hear me? I want to cut something out of the paper.
So just the act of having a character not respond to another is a great way to create conflict in a scene. Now, since Pinter is a playwright, he can just use time on the stage as a way to create silence. As novelists, we can't do that. So how do we create silences in our books? Well, for 2 examples of how to do this well, let's look at Hemingway and his short story, Hills Like White Elephants. So in this scene, you have a guy trying to convince a girl to get an abortion. The first time he suggests this, what does the girl do? She looks away, right? She looks down to the table legs. Doesn't say anything in response, but we get sort of a beat of us getting to see her action, letting us see what she's doing. That's a pause. That's silence. That's how silence works in books. And then the second time, Hemingway just directly calls attention to the fact that she is not speaking back to him. He just says, like, she didn't say anything at all. So your strategy can be to use descriptions or to use thoughts or to use actions to sort of delay and then have the other character speak again, which indicates like, hey, this character is being silent. They're not responding. Or you can just explicitly call out their silence in the text. But the great thing about those pauses is that we can tell, even without her saying anything, that she is really resistant to what this guy is suggesting. She does not want to go through with this. So I'd recommend for you to find at least one place in your novel where a character has a vested interest in not responding to the other person. and then milk that silence for all it's worth. Really let us feel that tension. This next point is probably the most controversial one I have in this whole video, so you can be the judge on whether you want to use it or not. It is called number 3, Mamet Speak. David Mamet, once again, playwright, very famous, has a very distinctive and particular way of writing dialogue, and I would say it really sharply divides writers. You either love it or you hate it. So in a movie like Glengarry Glen Ross, I think there are probably 4 characteristics of this style of writing dialogue. 1, characters do a lot of interrupting of one another and sort of talking past one another. It's a very messy style of dialogue writing, and he does that because he thinks it mimics the way that people often talk in real life. The second thing is this dialogue is really fast. They're sort of machine gunning words past one another. Sometimes they're finishing each other's sentences, sometimes they're repeating themselves, but it is not leisurely paced dialogue. And yes, you can mimic this on the page by just having a quick back and forth with very minimal thoughts or character actions. 3, his dialogue's often loaded with jargon. So you have characters who know so much about a particular topic, and they're just peppering their dialogue with very distinct phrases that show they really know what they're talking about. And the 4th characteristic of this dialogue is it's frequently vulgar. These are people dropping F-bombs and all sorts of, cursing and profanity. And he does that because it's a way to show personality and to show sort of the culture of these people. Now, can you go overboard with all these techniques? Yeah, you can, right? And that's why Mamet Speak has sort of been parodied by some playwrights. David Ives wrote Speed the Play, which is basically just Mamet dialogue on steroids. And when you watch that, you realize, oh, whoa, too much. Dial it back a bit. This next dialogue technique is an ancient one, but that does not mean it's not good and that you can't use it today. It is number 4, Greek tennis. This is really rapid fire dialogue between 2 characters, almost like you're at a tennis match and you're just going back and forth, back and forth. Now, the Greeks actually had a term for this. They called this stickomythia. I think Greek tennis is a little more, catchy, so that's what I'm going with. But, if you want to know the term, there it is. And we're going to go back to Hemingway for this example. I think he does this really frequently, where he just have very short lines of dialogue, and it's alternating between 2 characters. I mean, look at this example. It's just about a cat, and they're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Very short lines of dialogue. It keeps the pace moving very quickly and also allows for a lot of interplay between your characters. They have a lot of chances to respond to what the other person is saying. I also think trying out this technique is a really good exercise for most writers because in general, writers have a tendency to sort of blather on a little bit too long. Sorry, especially when it comes to dialogue, right? Because dialogue needs to be punchy and concise and throw the blow and then in the dialogue. And so in general, writers will write, 3 or 4 lines of dialogue. And it's would that dialogue be better just as a single sentence? Well, a lot of the time, yes. And so if you practice Greek tennis and try to write a whole page of Greek tennis, just very short replies back and forth, you will train yourself to have a rapid fire dialogue, which works really well on the page, which is entertaining to the reader and also makes them feel like they're moving through your story quickly. This is the best point in the whole video. If you missed everything else or ignored everything else, I'm okay with that as long as you practice this one. This is number 5, deflection dialogue. This is a dialogue technique when one character or maybe even 2 characters talking to one another refuse to respond to what each other is saying. Now, you would think this doesn't work. And actually, last time I talked about this technique on this channel, which was probably a year and a half ago or so, people in the comments were like, this is ridiculous. This would never work. Okay, they were wrong because if you watch any movie or read any book, you will see this technique all the time, almost in every chapter. And I'll just give you a couple quick examples just so you know I'm not fooling you in any way. Look at Sally Rooney, Normal People. Do you think I'm still pretty? She says. And the guy says, you're in a good mood. Must have been a good party. Whoa, that is dodging. That is some evasion right there. That is a refusal to answer the question. So you think, ooh, what's going on in their relationship? For the second example, we're going to look at the greatest Christmas movie of all time. And you guys probably already know what it is without me even saying it. It is Die Hard. So Die Hard actually uses this technique dozens of times throughout the movie, where a character will say something and instead of responding, the other character will just go off on their own little tangent. I'll give you a really short example. The antagonist says, "Please God, no, you're one of them, aren't you?" Now, what could Bruce Willis say in response? He could have responded directly to the question, right? "No, I'm not one of the terrorists." Or he could have been like, "Maybe I am," just playing with him a little bit. But what does he actually say?
"Relax, I'm not gonna hurt you."
So really what the Bruce Willis character is doing is he's responding to like the deeper fear. This guy is worried since he is one of them that, he might hurt him. And so he just speaks directly to the deeper fear underlying the dialogue. Brilliant dialogue from, the greatest Christmas movie of all time. Third quick example of this technique from Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. Yossarian or Orr are having a conversation. Yossarian asks him, "Hey, please stop it." What does Orr say? Starts telling a story about his childhood, about keeping crab apples in his cheeks. Doesn't answer what he's saying at all, but that quick swerve in the conversation is a great way to show sort of Orr's mindset. Hey, just a little reminder that I have over 200 videos on this channel covering everything from first drafts to revisions, so subscribing is basically like a free craft library. So you should definitely subscribe. And if you're already subscribed, please hit the like button or that little bell that alerts you every single time I have a video come out. That's also a good thing to hit too. A sixth dialogue technique you need to use in every single novel, no matter what genre you're writing, is make your characters sound different. Your characters should sound different, right? But it's really hard to actually pull that off in a book because, you're one person, and often the way that you write, say all 5 or 10 characters in your novel, sounds pretty much like you, they don't sound like their individual selves. For an example of how to do this well, we're going to look at Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt, which actually just came out as a movie on Netflix too, so you should give it a read and give it a watch. So she has 3 characters and she makes them sound vastly different from one another. First we have Ethan, who's Scottish, and so he drops the G's off pulling, he does double negatives on the won't no one, he uses adjectives like brilliant, a brilliant season, and ends with an in it. And then we have Tova, who is this older Norwegian woman, and especially in the book, less so in the movie, she speaks in a very formal, elevated tone. "I'm aware this may be improper, barely acquainted, appreciate your discretion," right? Everything about this is a very elevated way of speaking. Then we have Cameron, who's this drifter who's living out of his van. So he speaks with a lot of cursing. He curses more than all the other characters combined. And he speaks in this very colloquial, casual tone, like a surfer or a bro dude. So I could read this book even without dialogue attribution, and I could tell which character is speaking just by the way that their words unfold on the page. So I would suggest that you take 3 of your main characters and try to write a dialogue between all 3 of them with 0 dialogue attribution. And just make sure that the reader can tell who is speaking by the way that they're talking, by the phrases that they use, by their slang, by their difference between formal and informal. If you can give that page to a friend and they know who is speaking, you've won the day, right? You've made your character sound like individual people. And also, as a bonus, you will use far fewer dialogue tags, right? Because they won't be as necessary. Our last point is an absolutely fantastic one. It is number 7, writing the multilogue. So di is a prefix meaning in Greek 2, right? So dialogue technically is between 2 people. A multilogue, on the other hand, can include dozens of people, as many characters as you want in a single scene. The danger is that it gets too confusing for the reader, right? But I do think there's some benefit to having a certain amount of chaos between a lot of characters speaking at one time. But if you have a scene in your novel with 3, 4, 5, 6 characters all speaking at one time, my advice is to give every single character a very clear objective in the book, something they want, and make everything that they say kind of reflect that plan to get what they want. That way you have a lot of conflict in the scene, and these characters are sort of jousting with one another for position and for power. Now, one of the best examples I've ever seen with this is Frank Herbert's Dune. There's a dining scene in Dune where everyone's around a table and everybody has certain objectives about what they're trying to get out of this planet. The Duke is assessing the power brokers, seeing how much political political maneuvering he has. Lady Jessica is trying to identify whoever the spy or the traitor is. The guild bank representative is the spy, and so he's trying to figure out how he can sabotage them. Paul Atreides is just trying to learn the ropes of politics and learn from his father what to do in scenarios like this. The doctor is trying to gauge the Atreides' worthiness of ruling the country, and then the water shipper is just there for the money, bro. Yeah, just wants some money out of this. But when you combine all those characters together, each with their own motivations and desires in a scene, you end up writing a wonderful multi-log where all the characters are crashing into one another, and there's so much subtext and so much conflict and so much tension. So I know it's intimidating, but I think you should try for some place in your book where you have a bunch of characters talking at once, all with competing aims. If you are really interested in investing in your story, check out Bookfox Lab. The link there has a lot more testimonials that you can read and just a lot more details about the program too. So check it out. And also keep on working on your dialogue. I hope that these 7 tips really help you with all the things that your characters are saying in your book. Happy writing.